Welcome to Four Questions. Here at Blackmore 4, we are fortunate enough to engage with incredible business leaders across various industries. Today, we are looking forward to gaining insights from Director of Strategy and Operations for Q Underwriting, Paul Gerada. With 20 plus years in various senior roles across the insurance industry, Paul has previously run commercial and personal lines, brokering business, change and integration teams, as well as mergers and acquisition functions. Now, given Paul's rich experience, it's no surprise there are numerous problems and obstacles that he faces probably on a daily basis. I can't wait to get his perspective on effective ways of solving complex problems. Paul, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so Paul, given your role working in strategy and ops, you're no doubt used to working with complexity alongside maintaining structure and due process. Can you tell us about a typical problem or problems or obstacles that you face in either part of that role in the insurance industry?
Yeah, I can. So probably the most relevant one would be we're obviously a very acquisitive company. We do lots of acquisitions, and integration of those acquisitions is probably the biggest challenge we face. One size doesn't fit all. We may have a target operating model in terms of structure for people, HR, finance, and systems. But what you obviously always encounter is that some of those businesses don't fit with that model that you have. So it's how do you best get that business to fit with that model, but without disrupting that business, because you bought it for a reason. It's nicheness, it's competitive edge in that sector. So how do you make sure that you don't disrupt that? So we try to. There's certain things that naturally will fit. So HR, absorbing the HR process into our group model tends to be a more of an easier transition. But systems and IT and processes tend to be the ones that tend to be the one where we may have an idea of how we want them to work or what systems we want them to be on. But until you get under the skin of the business, you don't realise that and until then that they perhaps don't fit with that model. So what we try and do is then be a bit more flexible about how do we use some of our processes to manage those systems, not necessarily changing their systems, but actually enhancing their proposition, their change processes, their release processes, the way they update the system and control the system, rather than necessarily just sort of throwing the baby out the bathwater and saying you will move on to this system, even though it won't fit. So we try and be a bit more flexible in our approach, because ultimately we want the businesses to succeed, and it's where we can add value. So if we can add value in enhancing their processes, controls, procedures, rather than necessarily just changing their full systems, that's where we tend to try and add value.
And I'm sure there must be some sort of resistance as well, because people have historically done things a certain way, and now all of a sudden things are changing. I mean, how do you deal with that? Yeah,
so I mean, I've worked in change for a long time, and it's about bringing people on the journey. So you need to engage them at the outset. You need to tell them why we're looking to change, get them involved in the change, get them to actually own some of the change, so then they actually feel empowered that they're actually driving some of the change rather than it's being dictated to them. So for us, it's about a collaborative approach to the way that we want them to be integrated into the company. We don't tend to go with an iron rod and tell them that that as from next week they're going to be doing this. The timescales can be flexible depending on the nature of the business and the complexity of the business. So again, we don't have a very prescribed model around timescales. So yeah, for us, it's very much a collaborative approach to how we integrate that business that we've acquired. Ultimately, we want them to be part of the business for a long time. So we need them involved in that process.
Sure. I mean, what you've described, there's so many moving parts and so much complexity, ambiguity, there's so many variables at play. So question 2 goes like this. Can you tell us of any tactics or solutions when it comes to unexpected challenges or roadblocks that crop up that you have found to be particularly effective?
Okay. One of the things that I've learned over the years is to try not to solutionize before you understand the true extent of the problem. being a operations kind of person, I'm naturally want to jump in and fix the issue straight away, and clear the roadblock. So what I've learned over the years is that not to jump in and even give any opinion until I've actually understood the full extent of the problem. So I tend to work I always ask for an impact assessment. Regardless, if it's a big enough problem, I'll ask for an impact assessment. And normally that can take, I'll give them a couple of days to draw up an impact assessment. And then I'll use that impact assessment to draw everybody into a meeting, the key stakeholders, the subject matter experts, to discuss the impact assessment, which then actually starts as leading into a collaborative way of trying to address the problem. Because what I find by that is they're involved in the solution. They may not like the outcome of the solution, but because they've been involved, they're going to be more engaged, and they'll accept the actual final decision around how we're going to overcome that obstacle. So again, for me, it's about understanding the full extent of that problem with the impact assessment, and very quickly getting all the right people in the room. And even though I may have an idea of what the answer is going to be following the impact assessment, I might socialise that with some of the key stakeholders before the meeting and say, look, I've seen the impact assessment, these are my ideas, and start to actually get them, plant those seeds in their head that this is where I'm thinking that we may need to go. And so that they've got the option to come back and sort of counter oppose that actually we're going to need to do this because of this and this. So again, it's for me, it's engagement, communication, and bringing people on the journey. Because if you don't bring them on the journey, the outcome, they might not like the outcome, push against it and push back against it, and that makes it even harder to implement.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm making a bold assumption here, but it feels as though you've learned this. Maybe as an operations person, you weren't always like this, and you kind of had to learn to be more strategic in your approach because you just want to get in there and fix the problem. Am I right? Or have I
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been very fortunate to work with some good people over the years, who have been sort of mentoring me over my career. And I used to be terrible for jumping straight in, both feet. But now, it's about stepping back, digesting, understanding the full extent of the problem, the actual impact, the true impact of the problem. Because sometimes once you get them to do an impact assessment, it isn't as bad as it actually made it out to be. When they have to put it down on paper and send that document into you, they have to stop and think about why they've raised that red flag. I actually, adopt the same principles for change requests. You make them fill in a form, and then they've got to represent that form, the change board or the steering group. And very quickly, sometimes people, their request for change suddenly disappears because they realise it wasn't a must-have, and they can live without it. So, yeah, for me, it's about that's about process and structure, but it's equally about communication and getting people to really think about what they want to do.
So from what I'm hearing, and I think it's a really wise strategy for our viewers, is have some evidence, something tangible and concrete in terms of your impact assessment or whatever that evidence may be, and then use a more of a strategic collaborative partnership approach in terms of gaining that buy-in in dealing with those problems. So yeah, great advice, Paul. Thank you. All right, so number 3, in your opinion, sure, this is a bit of a difficult one, but I'm dying to hear what you think. Are there just some problems that are impossible to solve?
I wouldn't say they're impossible to solve. The desired outcome may not be what you wanted, and it's about for me, it's about it's a choice. It's a choice thing. It's whether you want to invest time, money, and effort partially fixing a problem, because you can't. You acknowledge now you can't fix the problem completely, but there's normally ways and means of trying to mitigate the full impact of that problem. So you can put, you might not be able to mitigate everything, but you certainly can look at putting, small, what I call small steps in that can sort of soften the blow, if you want to put it in sort of layman's terms. But again, you have to assess that with the amount of effort, time, and money spent doing that. About actually, is it worth doing it? Because actually we know that the problem is still going to be there. We're going to have to live with the problem. There's workarounds. The workarounds may not be palatable, but there are workarounds. And actually trying to automate some of it, or put some improvement in there, maybe too costly and too time consuming. So for me, it's very much about decisions. It's a choice, and it's about outcomes. If the outcome warrants partially fixing the issue, then normally we would go ahead with it. But there are certain things we just live with. Certainly in application world, where you're delivering new software, new products, all the time we go live with defects that we don't fix. We just live with them. They're not showstoppers. So for me, it's about the nature of the issue that can't be resolved, and whether there are mitigating factors that can reduce the impact of that issue and the value of doing so. But sometimes you might just accept that it can't be resolved, and the consequences are worth living. You can live with them. It's very much a choice thing for me. I've never said they can't fix an issue, but you can certainly mitigate some of its impact.
Wise answer. Okay, are you ready for Bingo Buzz?
I am.
Okay, so this is a surprise question that we pose on all of our guests. Nothing too scary, but really just want to get your opinion. So our Bingo Buzz question goes like this. Are strong leaders effective in all work environments?
I would say no, because I would consider myself to be a strong leader, but I know I have weaknesses. So I would say that my answer to that would be, measuring myself, I would say no, they're not always strong leaders across all environments.
And why do you say that? I mean, if we had to take a strong leader and that's worked in the Western world and throw them into a Far Eastern environment, why wouldn't they be effective?
I mean, culturally, if you apply the analogy to business, there will be, culturally there are differences in businesses and people, and we buy businesses that are culturally, I think, completely different to how we operate. Sometimes, there is just, you may not understand those cultural differences, or you may not be sympathetic to some of those cultural differences. So I think that that's about an education thing. There are things I learn about people every day. I think I'm a good people person, but every day something new comes up. I think, well, actually, I didn't realise that.
Surprises you.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me, it's about culture and about interpreting people. And sometimes, I'm too delivery focused to sometimes acknowledge that there are some other issues going around that are perhaps impacting people or the business, and so you sometimes have to step back and say, well, why is that person not available? Why is that person not doing that job? Normally they're very good, and so sometimes it's about just sometimes stepping back again, and saying, well, are there any sort of external factors that are sort of maybe impacting people's ability to do something, or their fit for the organisation. So yeah, I think sometimes I personally get very, very blinkered about delivery. I tend to be very structured in the way I deliver things. So sometimes when there's things going on outside, it's being able to be sympathetic to those, trying to address those, but at the same time being delivery focused and understanding how you're going to deal with it. Is it something that do you need to look at maybe supporting an individual or and saying, well, look, actually, why don't you take some time and I'll look if I can get somebody else in to do your role or do your function. So there's for me, COVID's probably been the most challenging time for me around people and change of circumstances. It's made me adapt. Probably the last 2 years taught me to be much more adaptable around people than perhaps I've been in the last 20 odd years.
Paul, I've loved our conversation. Thank you so much for your insights. Really interesting and looking at the way in which you approach problem solving, especially that you are balancing between strategy and operations. I find it so fascinating. So thank you for your time. And it was a great pleasure to have you on 4 questions.
Great. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.